Guitar music doesn't just soothe Carol, it gently tickles her ankle. Her best friend's name Kate has a taste of fruit and nut chocolate. James was born in London. As a young boy, he used to travel to school using the London Underground, and he could literally taste his entire journey as he passed through each tube station. The announcer would make an announcement, Piccadilly Station, and he would taste peanut and goo. Tottenham Court Road, that was his favourite. Tottenham would taste of sausages, Court would taste of eggs, while Road would taste of toast. I got the pleasure of meeting Carol when I was studying neurological pathways in 2006. Carol and James are synesthetes, and they have a disorder called synesthesia. This condition in 2006 was at the forefront of neurological science, a place that it finally reached after being discovered 200 years ago. Synesthesia is a blending of the senses. It affects about 4.4% of the population. It's where stimulus to one sensory cognitive pathway stimulates an unstimulated sensory pathway. The word itself comes from the Greek to mean joint senses, as opposed to the more popular phrase, the popular word anesthesia, which means no sensation. The first report was in 1812, and then there were a few reports in the early 19th century, but interest in the condition seemed to fall away in the 1930s as behaviourism became a more popular trait and popular discussion. Behaviourism accounts for everything by saying that experiences or conditioning from a person's immediate environment gives rise to how they understand sensory stimuli. It wasn't until 1995 when Simon Baron Cohen, in a small institute in London, started to investigate synesthesia in a more detailed way. He took a group of synesthesia people and a group of non-synesthesia people and exposed them to auditory stimulus, things they could hear. In the synesthesis, he was able to use an MRI scan to show brain activity in the visual cortex, even when blindfolded. Finally, there was some research that excited the neuroscientific community, and finally we could start to investigate synesthesia. In present day, there are 60 known types of synesthesia. James experiences words as tastes. Carol used to experience sounds as feelings, as touching on her lips mainly. There are even some famous synesthetes. Lady Gaga and Pharrell Williams both experience sounds as colours, and this is called chromathesia, while the most popular type is where letters and numbers become tinged with colours, and this is called grapheme synesthesia. Let's quickly consider how we perceive the world around us and how sometimes we take it for granted. After all, commonality in the way that we perceive things can make things seem so normal. When I say to you the letter Q, what colour do you think of? Is it purple? Or what about the letter A? You associate that with red. Those are fairly rare. What about when you walk into a blue room? You get a sense of cooling calmness. Because orange invokes the feeling of summer and warmth. It seems obvious to understand that there's a series of inputs and stimuli constantly being received by our brain and nervous system. And that our brain and nervous system naturally needs to apply a series of filters and interpretations to help us create the world we experience. And this happens on both a conscious and an unconscious level. So while it's taken nearly 200 years to understand the condition that is synesthesia, in the last decade, researchers across psycholinguistics, education, neuroscience and psychology have started to focus their attention on how synesthesia can be used to impact non-synesthetes. Carol, when I met her, exhibited a fantastic memory. She was able to memorise things very quickly. So did James. In fact, lots of synesthetes all report increased memory capabilities. And this can't just simply be a coincidence. perhaps by using a multi-sensory approach, we can look at improving cognitive ability or even augment memory. Recent research has shown that training some people to think like synesthetes has improved memory and reasoning skills. So what are the applications of this research? Can synesthesia really be taught, especially if there are some advantages? Current science research is taking these considerations seriously. 11 colour grapheme synesthetes were investigated in Austria. They were given word associations and asked what colour they would see. What kind of synesthetic symptoms would they exhibit? It was found that the colours that they associated with the words were actually fridge magnets they owned as young children. This implied that there was an environmental association from childhood. So perhaps there is a real impact, perhaps synesthesis can be taught. Olivia Collizzoli from the University of Amsterdam is trialling methods of using coloured letters to prime synesthetic traits in non-synesthetes. So she gets a group of people and she shows them letters of different colours. Later on, she then gets people that have had this synesthetic training then complete colour matching exercises, word matching activities. And she's found significant improvement in their ability to complete these activities quickly and to improve their memory. Non-synesthetes, or people that didn't have the training, experienced involuntary associations, something known as the streak effect, which can have a serious impact on people's learning. Synesthesia doesn't just have implications for memory and creativity. Some believe that synesthetic interventions can even be used to treat mental disorders. In fact, some of the current scientific research says that synesthesis and sensory processing disorders are actually synonymous. So what are the advantages of this disorder? Is disorder really the right term to use? Is it linked to autism, Alzheimer's, and schizophrenia? Clearly, there is a lot to learn about synesthesia and cognitive pathways. Is it linked, or does everything taste like glue?